You and your longtime friend decide to play some Soul Calibur. He's always been passionate about fighting games, but your raw talent always puts you on top, even since the Dreamcast. Yeah, we going back that far. And even though he goes and competes in tournaments and you don't, you've always won. But something just feels different. Something feels off about you guys playing today. He's moving in a different way, he's attacking in a different way. Every time you throw out an attack, it feels like you're getting hit. So it's coming down to a last hit scenario, and he throws out his same combo that he's always been throwing out, every time. So you go and get ready to try to counter this, and all of a sudden, you don't get to counter. He ends up hitting you and ends up winning the fight. In a quick stagger shot, you slowly get your composure back, and you cool, you chill, but you gotta know. Yo bruh, what made you do something different this time that you normally don't do? You've been winning these last couple of games, I just gotta know, man. What made you do something different? And so they give you the response.
Well, seeing that my AAK is -2 on block, I don't want to risk my I-12 4BA4 in case if you did a I-14 2A. So I decided to wait on the block and so I'll use that -10, so I did my I-10 punish.
Ninja, what? I-12? -10? Man, we supposed to be playing fighting games, not doing math, bruh. Now, before you kick your homeboy out the house for going full-blown nerd on you, they did take their fighting game up to the next level, and you gotta respect that. And with this video, you'll be able to learn how to do that too by knowing what frame data is and the importance of using it. What's up, y'all? This is the Shogun. I've been a game competitor for 10 years, and in this episode of the Shojo, I'm going to go in depth with frame data, the mathematical part of fighting games that people often look over. And with good reason. It sounds boring. Nobody wants to learn about numbers when you're trying to punch things, right? You're trying to slashy slash and get all up in the combos, right? Trust me, I get it. But that's what I'm here for, to try to make learning fun, right? And just like the previous episode, this episode will be split into 2 parts. Traditional fighters and Smash Brothers. Normally I would say platform fighters instead of just Smash Brothers, but seeing as I know little about frame data inside of platform fighters outside of Smash Brothers, I didn't want a lot of you guys to talk about something I know little about. So we just sticking with Smash, baby! But if you want to use this as a template for other platform fighters for frame data, then be my guest. I have no problem with that. I just didn't want to lie to you guys. Also, like the previous episode, I recommend staying for the whole video, as even though they are executed differently, we are still in the same genre of gaming, and we can learn from one another.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an
Platform fighter.
What about side by side with a friend?
I could do that.
Also, before I go in depth with this video, please be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with future episodes, and give it a like if you found it helpful. So now that's all out the way, put on your math gi and step with me into the Shojo. So where do frames fall in the competitive code, and what exactly are they? Frames are a subgenre of technical prowess and game sense, as knowing how many frames it takes to launch an attack and executing said attack takes having knowledge of the game and what moves to execute. Frames are the amount of movement animations needed before an attack can be executed. Each movement animation is a frame, and the amount of animations, or frames, needed before an attack can connect is the number you go by. An abbreviation of frames is usually preceded with an I, so when an attack takes 10 frames to execute, it is usually pronounced I-10. The collection of knowledge of frames and their different properties in various engagements is called frame data. Competitive players, Reddit users, forum users, and leaders and respected members of FGC communities usually put all of this frame data into a flowchart, known as a frame data flowchart. Each attack in any specific fighting game has different reactions based on the attack's interactions. Given the huge amount of different attacks inside any given fighting game, and the fact that each one of them have different interactions, it can seem overwhelming to try to remember all that data. Luckily, these interactions can be broken down into 3 specifics: on hit, on block, and on whiff. I'll start with on hit because that's what's needed to win the round. But before I start talking about the interactions of attacks on hit, I must first explain the interactions of disadvantage and advantage frames. And if you suck at math, this may be a whoo boy moment. I'll try to explain this as best as possible though, so bear with me. But we're learning though, right? Woo! Games! And people thought when you play video games you would become mindless zombies and drones. But at the same time you might be thinking math wasn't used in fighting games, so trade-off? Alright, but let's get back into this. Earlier I talked about abbreviating frames usually starts with an I. Well, let's use that imaginary I and think of it as a negative. See what I did there? I, imaginary? Okay, I'll stop. Okay, so here's an example. Taki's standing horizontal is I10, or -10. A majority of frames that are on hit or block will affect the frames of your following attack. Attacks that put you at an advantage are called plus frames, giving you the chance to initiate your attack before your opponent. So let's say that an attack gives you +6. -10 plus 6 equals -4. So your next frame 10 attack will have the properties as if it came out as fast as -4, or I4. So let's say you want to perform an I12 attack, but your previous attack put you at a -2. -2 plus -12 equals -14. This will make it so your attack will come out as late as -14, or I14. Alright, so let's get into the first interaction, on hit. After an attack is initiated and connects, or hits, the properties of follow-up attacks are usually an advantage to the person connects with the blow. The amount of plus frames varies between different attacks, so a quicker attack will yield little to no plus frames, sometimes can even put you at disadvantage depending on the game, while higher framed attacks usually yield more damage and plus frames. Well, unless it's Smash Brothers, but don't worry, we'll get into that later. Higher framed attacks also yield added effects on hit. The most common noticeable effects are stun, knockdown, bounce, launcher, crumple, and unblockable. Plus frames on hit can also yield more damage not normally obtainable through standard combos. These are called frame lengths, and their window of opportunities vary between fighting games. So let's say you're playing Soul Calibur 6 and you're using Taki, and you get your 4BA4 to hit. Well, 4BA4 is +10 on hit, so if you go into possession and use your BA, which is I8, you'll actually be able to make a new combo between those two, and have an extra 2 frames to connect them. This is called a 3-frame link. In Smash Ultimate, if Dr. Mario hits his down 10 on Fox at 97%, he's at +12. With the sweet spot of his up B being at I3 and he has between 8 and 9 frames of jumping, he can actually connect these for a true combo. With an impact frame on top of the extra frame, this becomes a 2-frame link. So let's talk about frames on block. If your attack is blocked, you have a higher chance at being at negative. This is why attacking consistently after an attack is being blocked can sometimes yield bad results, depending on how negative you are prior to the attacks. Some attacks have very low negative frames on block, causing for consistent attacks to be harder to punish, while other attacks have huge gaps in how big of a disadvantage they are after block. So whiffed attack frames can vary on multiple instances, but the biggest factor that affects whiffed frames are how long the lingering effects of the attacks will last. A majority of attacks can have lingering effects well past the initial starting frame of the attacks, and the longer the frames of the attack, the longer before the opponent can make another action. Meaties, sex kicks, and rapid attacks have huge ranges in their lingering hitboxes. So instead of trying to compile all that data, a simple way of determining when the lingering hitboxes are over is by determining the amount of frames it takes at the initial impact and what the additional frames would be after you had blocked. So how does one benefit from frame data? Well, one benefit of knowing frame data is the knowledge of which punishes to use for unsafe and whiffed attacks. So if someone spams attacks and you know your frame data, you can stop the sequence right in its tracks when they get momentum. And just like the scenario mentioned at the beginning of this video, another advantage is having the knowledge to know where you're at on advantage and disadvantage of your attacks. It also helps with momentum pressure and spatial pressure too. As when you know your frames, you know exactly what a person can and cannot get away with. It also helps with reaction-based sequences, giving you the knowledge to know how many frames you can get away with and what your next chain of attacks can yield afterwards. All of these benefits give you the extra edge you need to win a game. Okay, so now I've explained all you need to know about frames and frame data, you're about to get hit with a curveball. Online, baby! Ah yes, playing fighters online. The only place where you roll up matchup experience and bad habits in one delicious yet depressing burrito. Being knowledgeable in frame data and playing online is kind of like going to college as a millennial. You're happy about the experience, but you are often screwed once you're back into the real world. That GI to GI degree isn't letting you any wins in offline, huh? At least you can say you played as Zasamel. Online lag can vary anywhere from as little as 4 frames to about 15 frames of lag, give or take. To add insult to injury, these numbers can vary at any point throughout the fight. So the next time you hear someone raging about lag, they honestly may be telling the truth.
So I'll probably still play a few times a week if people come over. But I'm never playing online unless they fix it.
It's a tough pill to swallow, I know. My origin story comes from being an online fighter, so I feel it. Depending on the amount of lag, certain attacks cannot be blocked on reaction. So if there is, let's say, 10 frames of lag, blocking certain attacks and trying to link certain attacks become impossible to do on reaction online. And players who play a lot online, I know what you're probably thinking.
The lag goes both ways.
You are correct, it does go both ways. But if a person is able to push a goal further when all tools are accessible to them, you are literally hindering the person who's able to utilize the best of what's given to them. You're straight up nerfing them, a hard nerf at that.
Okay, so this is where the video splits, so follow the time steps accordingly. I got as much info as I could that both styles of fighting games could benefit from. Obviously they're not 100% interchangeable, but hopefully there's enough info to get you interested in one or the other. So just stay for me.
Boy, if you don't get
But okay, if you're still interested in the time steps, smashers, follow the time step accordingly, as I'll be starting with traditional fighters first this time. Frame data in traditional fighters is pretty straightforward. You block, you miss, or you hit, and the frames are affected accordingly, depending on the move you use. There are little to no movement frames that equate to effects on frames in most cases in traditional fighters. This is due to the overall nature of traditional fighters being in a locked engagement. Your jabs, pokes, and specials are always more safe and viable in 2D fighters outside of tag battles. Knowing the frame data for your character's footsies in 2D fighters is important, as knowing your options on block or after a whiff can bait out your opponents to do an unsafe option to try and maximize their damage output, which in turn can maximize your damage with frame links. Speaking of frame links, your frame knowledge of your character becomes extremely important in tag fighters. Knowing your character's data for frame links on top of adding assists from the tag can extend combos to an extreme amount of damage, sometimes even taking a character out in one combo. Out of all traditional fighters, it is most important to know frame data in your 3D fighters. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it isn't important in 2D fighters, in fact it's one of the most important things, but in 3D fighters your knowledge of your frame data over your opponent can determine the whole game before it even starts. Every option you use in a 3D fighter has more impact on your frame data than any other fighting game, due to the nature of 3D fighters having pokes more unsafe on whiff and block. Also, if a launcher is being blocked, 50-50 mix-up being blocked, high being crouched, or low being jumped, if you know your character's frame data, you can take huge advantage of these on your opponent for their mistakes. So that's it for the fighting game portion. And I know you're probably thinking, well that was fast. Yeah, that's the reason why I want to get all that frame data out early, so the little parts in fighting games I could cover. And you're probably also thinking, but show, what about fuzzies? What about option selects? Don't worry, those are coming, but those don't directly affect your frames in a way that would be viable in this video. That's why they got that subscribe button. You hit that, you'll be able to see the video. So don't be shy, don't be scared. Alright, on to Smash now. So frame data has always been a weird thing in Smash. Seeing as Smash has free movement, counting frames and knowing frames has always had a unique take compared to traditional. To outside spectators, and even members of the Smash community who don't know frame data, it's easy to assume that when you see hits on Smash, that they're all at negative. But in actuality, Smash has some of the most plus frames of any fighting game ever. The drawback to this, however, and why punishes and combos can't be extended further than what they are, is one thing: movement. Movement is just as important as impact frames in Smash. It affects everything, including your combos. It affects your whiff, it affects your block, it affects everything inside the game, because the movement in the game is so free. Other effects on frame data in Smash are weight of characters, character slide speeds, the directional influence or DI they use, character shields, and character's life percentage. And in Melee, they have an additional effect on block with their shields, as how hard or how light you press the shield button will determine how much you are at negative. With so many factors going into frame influence in Smash and the amount of characters, it is impossible to remember all that data. Seriously, I don't even think M2K could do that. So to trim down all that fat and get to the meat of optimizing your frame data, it's best to know the percentages and options that your character has when in a block or attack situation. That is because no matter what influences your frames, your character's attacks will always be more plus at higher percentages and your defense is ineffective. The last two things that affect your frames in Smash are the initial startup of your attack and platforms. Attacks in Smash don't always have initial startup of being in front of the opponent, so this affects your frames. And platforms can extend your combos by reducing the amount of movement frames you need. So that's it for the Smash portion and the end of this video. Once again, if you found it helpful, please be sure to give it a like and sub to your boy if you want to stay up to date. Until the next time we step into the Shojo, peace, love, and show out.